you are the same person in every circumstance. And so working on that rather than just how you sound on the phones, way more impactful and way better use of your time, quite frankly, to work on, because then it ripples out, not just for you, but for all the people in your circle as well.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Closers Network podcast. Man, it feels like a little bit of a while since I've done an episode, and I'm excited to introduce our guest today. Guys, today's guest knows exactly how to step up and close deals, literally. This guy went from grinding outbound sales to raking in over 10K every single month, proving that high-ticket sales isn't just about skill. It's about persistence, adaptation, and the guts to go all in. But here's the kicker. When he's not closing, he is also an Irish step dancer. That's right. This man can handle objections and a mean jig. So help me, guys, introduce a guy who went all in, mastering both outbound and inbound sales. Along the way, he's learned through some lessons. He's learned getting fired right after vacation, a wake-up call that reshaped his approach and his responsibility. And so I'm excited to dive into that, guys. He's someone who is got a lot of insights on the outbound selling and the mindset shifts that separate closers from amateurs. And so I'm really looking forward to diving in with today's guest. Help me welcome Jesse Halstrom. Jesse, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's great to be here.
So help me understand. Let's start here, dude. How long have you been in sales, and like how did you get this whole thing started?
Yeah, it's a good story, right? I think like most of us, I was in a 9 to 5. I was working in the medical field, lab supervisor. Thought I had, kind of hit a lot of good strides, but then I just realized that was it. I kind of hit my cap just a couple of years out of university, and there wasn't really much else to go without going back to school or moving to a town, and with family in the picture. That wasn't really what I wanted to do, and so I felt the Lord calling on my life to go more into the finance side, the entrepreneurship side, the side that figures out, hey, what do we do with the rest of our time here other than just doing the same thing again for the next 40 years, right? Like most of us. And so I found sales, right? I found high ticket closing specifically, not just sales, to be clear. And it totally transformed my life. I spent a couple of years actually training and getting out there, trying out a few things, seeing how it works. But like you said earlier, there's that point where you just got to go all in if it's going to work. And for me, that is my story. I literally quit my job while my wife was pregnant with our first child and just dove straight in. Yeah, it was maybe not the smartest decision, but hey, that's where I am right here. So there was a lot of urgency with that. I was doing some copywriting as well, closing, and eventually found my stride with my very first influencer, I guess you could say, business owner, where I was able to do what you just said. I started out, no experience. They weren't even going to hire me. I was like, yeah, I'm not even who you're looking for someone more experienced. But I was actually able to close them into hiring me on an outbound position because they had a couple of different lists that their closers weren't primarily focused on. I was like, hey, well, I mean, if I could come in there and help you out with that, would that be valuable? Something to those effects. They were very, very kind back when my skills were very green. And it all rolled out from there. Came in, set some appointments for myself, managed to close some deals. They had more leads than they could handle, open it up, and the rest is history.
Dang. So that's interesting, dude. So you while you had a pregnant wife, is that your first?
Yeah, that was my first at this time. Now I've got 2.
No, okay, congratulations. So you're in a spot where you're like, dude, I want to do sales, and you just sort of like, I'm going all in on this thing. I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah, because I mean, nothing else was changing, right? Like, it may not have been the best time, quote unquote. This was right during COVID as well in 2020, going into 2021. So I'd been familiar with remote for a little bit leading up to it, so it wasn't too much of a shock. It just felt like the right time. I can't explain it other than that. It was the right time. It was very scary. It was very hard in those moments, but when your first 5-figure paycheck comes through, it really, really starts to become like, okay, now I can see where this is going through. As we all know, being in sales, there's ups, there's downs, and not every month was like that. But I think it just, like you said, really set the tone for the path that I went on. And I'd love to talk more about kind of what I see as the value of that now, being where I'm at right now with One Call Closers, managing our appointment setting team for VShred, because it's very similar to how I feel my journey was shaped, getting me to where I am today, and also the impact it has on the clients that we serve as well.
So let's talk about that, man. So I would love to actually, before we get into that, I'd love to hear about how that whole thing started. But Walk me through, man. You said like not every month's a 10 plus K month. There's highs, there's lows. As someone who's got a pregnant wife, is about to have his first child, you're decided to go all in on this thing, which is very relatable to a lot of other individuals, including myself. Just decided I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna go all in. But I would imagine there's probably nights during that, like you stay up, right? And there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of overwhelm, there's a lot of I'm gonna figure it out. And the advice that I always like to give people is and challenge them with is like, dude, are you really going all in or are you saying you are? Right? It's one thing to decide I'm going to go all in and make sales my full thing, but what you're doing with your off time, like when you're not working, like, are you truly committing to the craft or are you just like interested in the craft? Right. So for you, when you're going through these motions and you decide that, dude, I'm going all in, commission only, got a baby on the way, got all this stuff going on, I got to figure out sales. What is like Jesse's day to day look like? Like, what does the mindset look like? What are the habits looking like? And how are you improving the skill sets if maybe you quite haven't had the ability to really dial in sales just yet?
Perfect question, right? Because I'm firm believer that we're all on our own journey, right? We're no one's reached a peak that they're just stopping at. It's a
Mm,
continual growth. And for me, going from having hit the highs but still having the lows, I haven't even personally hit that point where it's as consistent as I'd like it to be. So what I
mm,
can say though, from my experience in going from the 9 to 5 to commission only and what it really takes to turn that into something that converts is it starts like the night before, right? Like, I mean, it's something as simple as that. The best, days, weeks, months, years ahead starts the night before. You gotta prepare. You gotta put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, in terms of not just saying you're going to go all in, right, but having your actions follow those words, right? And nothing
yes.
matters, and it's the consistency too. That's the biggest thing. I mean, I've got a number of core values. Consistency is one of them, and I find that the way that I create my own core values is less about here's what I think sounds nice, more so what have I seen that when I change, that actually moves the needle? And consistency is
Mm,
the biggest one, right? Just not letting those downs keep you down or get you out of the system of what we know works, right? And it takes a lot
hmm.
of endurance. That's the perfect word for it, is endurance. And continuing to develop my own endurance in that way has helped me continue to grow and expand, and it still will in the future, especially now that I lead other people kind of down this same path. So I would say
Mm.
it's having your actions follow your words, staying consistent, and being okay with building endurance doing that.
Oh man, I love that. Have your actions swallow your words. That's a great way to put it. Um, Consistency. Give me just like if I know you have said you have a few core values, like give me two more. Like consistency is one of them.
Oh, you're
What
killing
would
me.
you
Okay,
rank there in the top three for you?
so that's a good question. So I got some that are like very specific to me, but I will say right alongside with consistency is commitment, right? And those
Oof.
might, yeah, I'll say that again. Right alongside consistency is commitment, because that might sound the same, but it's one thing to get up and go through the motions every day and be consistent, right?
Mm-hmm.
You always see where I'm going
Mm-hmm.
with this. It's another to have you're all committed into that every
Mm,
day consistently. So I'd say commitment is another one of
mm.
theirs. And then I'm a big fan of the whole, I'm a big operations and processes guy. I'm a whole big fan of constant improvement, Kaizen, some of you guys know it.
Yeah.
Because if you can consistently commit to improving, like what else do you need? That covers the bases.
Cosmin. I think I always reference Tony Robbins,
Mhm.
Kanai, constant and never ending improvement, right?
Right.
And that's really what it's all about, man. So I love that. So and that's gonna stick with me. Have your actions swallow your words. I'm gonna be using that one. I'll make sure I reference Jesse
Good.
Halstrom for that one.
You can quote me on that.
All right, that's awesome, dude. So fast forward, you got your gig you got the first gig of like starting an outbound. If I'm not mistaken, you've done now a combination of inbound and outbound. And
Yes.
so you've gone from outbound sales to inbound sales. What would you say is like the biggest mindset shift that you've had when transitioning between these two?
Ooh, that's a good question, because I know a lot of closers in particular, they get straight into the inbound stuff. If they've gone through some training, especially if they got some talent as well. But I can tell you the biggest mindset shift for me came from when I first was calling people who had no idea who I was, right?
Mm,
Total call calling, like, hey, can I talk to you about your website? Kind of cold calling, like
yeah.
that kind. there's just a whole level of we talked about earlier, endurance that you build from just the constant, like, people don't know who you are, people say no, people get angry, people are happy but then still don't move forward. Like, that whole process really shaped my perspective on what I
Mm,
feel like I can tolerate in a given day,
mm,
right? And so I would say the biggest mindset shift I've seen for people who necessarily don't have that is just getting through the volume that's required to get good. Like, even before my sales days, when I was first doing my whole lab tech stuff out of school, it took me a whole year to go from every morning going to work being like, hopefully I can do my job today, like hopefully I can be a good job, to the point where I had mastered it. Not that I was the best person in the world at it, but I personally had mastered it to where I knew what I was doing. There were no questions, and I could tell somebody else how to do it as well confidently. And I knew whatever came into the lab I could handle. Right. And it's the kind of the same thing with sales. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily there yet with sales, although I'm on my way. But it's the same thing where you gotta know that it's not just about what works in an ideal scenario. It's about how you can handle it when it's not necessarily ideal, or when someone's coming at you with
mm.
things that you weren't prepared for, or you show up in a way that you didn't expect to because you got some other personal stuff going on. I think it's that handling of the unknown that really creates this long-term sustainability that we're talking about. So again, to answer your question, going back to mindset shifts, it's knowing that, like, you got to do the work, right? You got to be the one to get in there and make everything happen, because it can be easy just to sit back and let calls come to you, and right, and maybe they close, maybe they don't. But coming from the outbound perspective, you like eat what you kill kind of a thing, right? And we've all
Yeah.
heard that before. And so I think that it's important for closers of all varieties, whether they're outbound or inbound, to remember that your results are your responsibility. And so going back to having the commitment in what we're doing, not just being consistent, but being active and involved in every single step of that, I think is the biggest key in that area from my experience.
Man, I couldn't agree more, dude. My soundboard. I wish you were in person so I could be dropping gongs right now,
We'll
man.
have to
I
do
had a
that in a
few
couple
gongs.
months. We'll see. We'll
I'll
give it
see
some
you
more
in a
time.
couple months for sure. But dude, that's freaking powerful. There's a couple of takeaways that I had from that, and one is, I hear you talking about you got to get good at processing issues and thinking on your feet, which in my opinion is probably one of the number one skill sets that you need in remote high ticket,
Mm,
because I think so many people, if they're on an hourly right now, they come inside to sales, dude. They think like, oh man, if I just got to do the same things I'm doing an hourly and I'm going to be successful at sales.
yeah.
And I found that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, most people that come from an hourly job, like, they kind of just tend to sit there and wait to be told what to do. But if you want to thrive in sales, in my opinion, dude, like, you need to be proactive, not
Yeah.
reactive, right?
Mm,
And so you cannot translate those same, skills that you had in an hourly job into a commission only job, where like you got to get after it and you got to put on what I call the FIO hat, right? The figure it out mentality. So
mm,
like, yeah, to your point, Jesse, like, you may not know all the answers, right? But the question is, like, are you willing to figure it out? Right? Are you willing to be proactive and not be reactive? And in my opinion, dude, if you are, you're going to go a long way in sales. And if you're not, you're so used to being told what to do, and that's the pattern of kind of thinking that you have, and you think like, hey, I'm just going to sit and wait around and just wait for things to happen, like having
right.
sales calls just trickle on my counter. Like, I could tell you the best in the game that I see, don't just count on those leads to come in, right? They're actively reaching out. They're actively hitting up past no-shows. They're hitting up freaking follow-ups, right? They're figuring out ways how to dial in that talk track. They're watching other people's sales calls. They're watching their own sales calls, right? They're doing a combination of all these things, right? Constant and never-ending improvement to get better, to get to that next level. So, dude, I think what you said is so powerful, and I think people just need to hear it more, especially if they're considering getting into sales, because the last thing you want to do is have an expectation that sales is going to be rewarding and give you all this, fruit to your labor. But like, if you ain't doing the work, if you ain't doing the necessary activities, it just may not, right? It's very possible that it doesn't.
Yeah, and a big thing there to go off of your point is, one of the hardest things that I had to come to terms with was, it's not just doing the work, it's doing 100%, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't get a sale until they move across the final line. Doesn't matter if you did the call 80% perfectly, 90%, 99. If you don't get to 100, you got zero. And I'm going to say something that maybe is a bit controversial, but I think nine
We
to
love
five.
that on this show.
I was going to say, it's controversial, but I think 9 to 5s are overrated for most people. I think that, or maybe underrated actually, because what we're talking about doing here is really nice to see on an Instagram ad, right? Like what we're talking about, like making 10K a month in sales. It's like, it's totally possible and it is rewarding, but I don't think that most people realize what you give up to get that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are honestly a lot happier just being told what to do for 8 hours a day, getting 2 weeks of vacation, and that being it. I think that for a lot of us in entrepreneurship, we know that that's actually a luxury, right? That's not just a given, that's a luxury. You got to earn that and more, but it takes so much to get there. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. And so I think that, not to dissuade anybody from doing this, clearly we both have, but knowing what you're getting yourself into is, it's not that you start day one, you live the laptop lifestyle. It's you start day one, you work like crazy for however long it takes. It's not even a guaranteed amount of time
That's right.
until it's enough, right? Until it's enough, and then
That's right.
you can start to create that lifestyle, and that even in itself will go up and down based on how much you put into it. So I think that that would be the other thing I would want to capitalize there on, is like, I my personal opinion is most 9 to 5ers are overpaid because they're getting paid just for to be there, but we get paid off of literally the moment to moment, second to second value that we're putting out into the world. And that's why I think commission is the best form of compensation, just because it aligns everybody's incentives correctly and eliminates a lot of waste. That's just my personal opinion.
I agree, dude. I agree. And you know what? I trained on a topic this week. As you know, as you probably know, one of the influencers that I kind of help and help scale offers for is Bradley.
Right.
He's actually coming down to the summit, so he's going to
Yeah.
be hanging out with us
That.
in person. Looking forward to that. But you know, one of the trainings I did earlier this week was kind of along the lines of almost verbatim what you said, which is we get paid for done. We get paid when the deal is closed. We don't get paid for effort. We get paid for done, right? And the only way to get it done is to get the money in. Like all of that other stuff is like nonsense, in my opinion. Like it's not nonsense, but it's important.
Sure.
But it doesn't matter if you don't get the deal in, right? You're not going to get paid unless it's done. And so there's no feeling like man, until that money comes in, it ain't it, right? It ain't real. And so the money's got to hit the account for it to be real. So many times I've had deal on the fences and you get overly excited thinking like it's 100% doner,
Worst.
and it's not in, right? It ain't in till it's in, dude. So long time ago, I stopped getting overly excited when I had like deals on, especially my background in real estate was like, you know, massive commissions, 10, 15, 20, 25, $30,000 checks.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, you think you're about to get this deal in? And then it's like, dude, the deal's not even close to getting done. And you already spent the money in your head and anticipated all this stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
dude, it's not in. Like you thought it's in, right? And it's like the reality is until the money hits the freaking bank, it ain't in, Dan. So
It's so funny you
yeah.
mentioned that. I used to do the same thing on a previous offer where we used to actually take the credit card numbers over the phone. Obviously, we don't do that anymore. But in that offer, I had done it so many different times to where people would just like cut the line as they're saying the number, that I got to the point where, you know, you go through the whole thing, you get to the close, they actually say yes, and I just be in my head like, yeah, you say yes, but we'll see what happens. And so, but what
Yeah.
it allowed me to do was keep that neutral tonality, right? It allowed me to keep that neutral approach. Where like, okay, sounds good. And then I get through the first four numbers and be like, yeah, sure, but we'll see if we get to the end. Whatever. Okay, and what's next? And then I get about halfway through and be like, oh, wait, are we almost there? Then you get 2/3 of the way through and you're like, okay, well, don't give me the last four, right? And then you get it. And then you're like, okay, sounds good. Welcome in, Mr. Prospect. Right. You know, like it's one of those things where I've had to kind of coach myself through how to handle that process. And I found that just like being as unattached as possible is the best thing to go through that, to make sure you do secure all the deals that should go through.
Absolutely, dude. I'm glad you shared that because when I was full-time doing just straight closing, I, you know, 4 digits at a time, please. And so I would wait till I got that expiration, the security code. But even till then, until that little widget stopped spinning and it said confirmed, I would have to refrain from getting fired up, dude, because I get fired up. You know, I'm high energy just naturally and stuff. So I get excited. And dude, ain't nobody celebrate a deal won on a call with the prospect like I do, in my opinion. Like I'm going to get the prospect fired up. I'm going to revalidate them in making this decision. I'm going to let them know that the best decision they made. I'm going to let them know how I'm excited that they're going to have a power team behind them to do X, Y, and Z, whatever product or service they signed up for, that they're going to be in great hands, that I'm going to be there to help serve them on top of the power team that they're going to have. But like, I couldn't do all that until like that widget stopped spinning and it said confirmation number, baby. And I was like, man, that's it. We're in. Okay. But it's a great feeling, man. I was actually doing that same training for Brad earlier this week, and it's funny. Like that's what I was training around. I'm like, dude, if you and because there was a lot of people that maybe aren't in closing and looking to get into closing, coming from an hourly position, which is why I was having the you get paid for done talk. But
Mhm.
a part of that was also like, guys, like if you've never experienced the feeling of what it's like to actually get a deal in, like the money's confirmed, it's one of the greatest feelings you can probably
Oh, it
experience.
really
One of
is.
the greatest dopamine hits you can probably ever have. And I was just like, wait until you guys experience that. It's going to change your life.
Especially your biggest one yet. That's always a special one.
That's right, dude. Ain't no month like the month I had 99K deposited in that account. I'll tell you
Well, I'm looking forward
that.
to that. That'll have to be soon.
Yes, sir. All right. That's good, man. That's awesome. So dude, one of the things that I found interesting is, you mentioned Dan Locke was one of the biggest influences maybe that you have. Would you mind sharing, like, was there maybe like a specific lesson or tactic that, you learned from Dan that maybe you still implement today, or that's kind
Totally.
of just helped you in closing deals?
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, Dan Locke, shout out to him. He was my first mentor in sales. I did a lot of
Wow.
time searching, as we do, for different people to follow, different things to pick up, and he happened to be the person who, of all the things I'd read, of all the things I'd listened to, what everything he said was ticking the boxes of the overlap. And I'm a big fan of
Mhm.
get as much information as you can, see where it overlaps, and usually where it overlaps is closer to the truth, especially if it resonates with
Mm.
you. He was that guy for me. Love him or hate him, everyone's got a different opinion. That guy changed my life. And I would say that the biggest difference that's made for me, especially from what I see from a lot of other sales professionals, is the emphasis he puts on the foundational skills, right? Like
Mm.
everyone's got a word track, everyone's got an objection handle. But the thing that guy focuses on the most is who you are coming to the call and who you are on the call rather than just what you say. And I think that in my sales coaching now, that's the biggest thing that I focus on because I can take somebody right now who's saying all the wrong things or saying it all the wrong way, shift their perspective, and then all of a sudden the words come out differently, right? Without
That's
even
right.
having to get there. And so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But a couple of things for you guys to latch onto at home. Number one, the biggest thing that I always go back to in terms of like a quote is when you say something, it means something. But when the prospect says something, it means everything.
That's right.
Some of you probably heard it before. I'll say it again. When you say something, it means something. But when they say something, it means everything. We're
That's
not
right.
here to convince people, hey, you should do this because it's good for your health. In the case of V-Shred, you should get this because then you're going to help have a better life. They don't care. They don't want your opinion. You got to ask them, okay, well, let's say, we fix this issue that we've now discussed. Like, what kind of an impact would that make for you? Would that be valuable for you to get an
Mm-hmm.
appointment and talk to an advisor about that? Once they
Mm-hmm.
say yes, get them on the calendar, get them in the hole, like whatever you need to do, get them where they need to go. But it should be their idea, not just
Not
yours.
yours. Yeah, yeah. That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I love that, and it's absolutely true, man. If it's your idea, it's like whatever. If it's their idea, it's a great idea, right?
Yeah.
So just
Oh,
kind
and
of heard
actually,
that.
yeah, one more thing. So that's, I would say, tactical on the calls in the sales life. That's my biggest one. Second thing, just for like a personal thing, because as we know, sales is not just who we are on the phones; it's everywhere in between, right? The biggest difference maker that's made for me as far as a quote goes, which is how you do anything is how you do everything. Probably
Hmm.
sounds like I can see you nodding. You probably heard that one too. How you show up to the calls, how you show up to podcast invitations, how you show up to your children, your family, the wait staff at the restaurant you go to. People think that their lives can be compartmentalized. I've learned that that's just not the case. And even if you can mask it, even if you can hide it, at its core, you are the same person in every circumstance. And so working on that rather than just how you sound on the phones, way more impactful and way better use of your time, quite frankly, to work on, because then it ripples out, not just for you, but for all the people in your circle as well. So that would be the biggest thing is when you say something, it means something. When they say something, it means everything. But then for people personally, how you do anything is how you do everything. That would be the biggest things that have made an impact on my life and how I operate and how I got the results that I did.
Damn, damn, dude. I have to drop it another one for that because here's the crazy thing, dude. I learned that lesson early on from a mentor I had, Bedros Koulian. He's kind of known as the Tony Robbins of the fitness industry, and he was actually my first gig in high ticket sales. I started helping Bedros sell franchises back in the day in 2017, 18, somewhere around then. But dude, it's one of the first lines I heard him say, and it really hit me, and I took it to heart. And you're having this conversation with me right now. We're talking about, what you're really doing closers to focus on is themselves rather than this special particular line you're going to say that's going to make
Yes.
all this difference, right? This having this line ready when the objection comes, and like, yeah, that stuff could work, but the identity, the self-image is the first thing, in my opinion, that needs to work on. And I'm going to say a story that I'm not going to throw in any names because I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but let's just say, for one of the sales teams that I run, we had an in-person retreat that we did where we extended like our lake house lakefront headquarters here in Canyon Lake, California. And we allowed about 8 to 10 of these people from this team to come stay for completely free in a mansion, like on the lake, right in Southern California. And so I also extended out, like the very studio I'm in has a private gym, right? And so we let our, people in the company, if they're visiting and stuff, we let them come to the gym. We let them every now and then stay at the lake house or leverage the lake house and stuff like that. And man, before we got this whole dang day started, the first day I was in the gym and I told all these people, all 8 to 10 of them, I was like, guys, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Rich has extended the opportunity for us to work out in his private gym at our headquarters, at our studios here. The only thing that I'm going to ask for you in exchange is to clean up after yourselves and put your dang weights back. Because I noticed like everyone was just leaving weights out. People were leaving trash around. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what is this? Like, I'm not used to this. Because like when someone extends that type of opportunity for me, like I fucking take care of myself. Excuse my French.
Yeah.
I'm getting fired up because this thing is really bothering me, right? And I'm like, dude. So I tell him this beforehand, like before we start the 3-4 days that they're here, and we let him stay for like 4 nights. And then at the house as well, I reminded him I was doing a 1-day full training workshop to teach him stuff, right? And the first thing I started the training with was, guys, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Like, I noticed X, Y, and Z at the gym. I know you guys are staying at the house. The only thing that we ask is in return is to clean up after yourselves. And dude, like some people cleaned up after themselves and others didn't. And it was just like, dude, like the only thing I asked for you guys to stay here was to clean up after yourselves. Like, and it just, and let's just say half that room is not closing at a high level. And I realized there's a correlation in the people that didn't freaking clean up after themselves in the gym or in the house to them not closing any deals. Because to your point, dude, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so it got me frustrated. Like, man, like work on you, right? And if you do work on you, and I've been giving this advice to people from day one, dude, because I realized that I need to work on myself. Like, forget about everything else.
Yeah.
Who's the person that I'm going to become? And so the moment I took that lesson away, I've been preaching and teaching around this stuff. And the moment I actually started doing that stuff and working on me, whether it was the workouts, whether it was just putting in the necessary work to figure out, watch my own calls, go through the framework, ask people for help, whatever that thing was, right? I realized that every time I would pour into myself, I would become authority because I didn't feel like a fraud on these calls anymore because everything I was telling all these people to do on my own sales calls, I was following my own dang advice.
Right.
And if you do that, you're going to have the confidence. And guess what? If you don't do that, you're going to lack the confidence and you're going to think like, oh yeah, it's because I don't know this word track or it's because of this. And no, dude, it's because you haven't put enough work into yourself.
You could say all the right things, but it's not going to come out the same way. And they're going to hear that even if they don't know why. And then they're not going to move forward.
That's right. So anyway, yeah, that's where like I realized early on about 10 years ago, because I was still new to this, just like a lot of these other folks are, right? And it's tough love. I love all these guys and gals that came out. It's nothing but love. But like I remember being that person back in the day, right? And it's like these are the moments that allowed me to get that different perspective and get to that next level, man. But it started with me, right? To your point, it started with me. It started cleaning up my own stuff internally. And then like doing all the things that I'm talking about doing is just helping me build my self-image, my self-identity. And then that allowed me to just become a next level sales rep, right? Next level salesperson. So yeah, anyway, dude, I got fired up about this topic. Shoot, we shouldn't have brought this one up.
It matters, right? And we better talk about the important stuff. And this is what sales is, isn't it? Like maybe it's a hard lesson here, maybe it's tough love, but we all would have rather heard this lesson earlier than we did. So we want to make sure we're passing it on for those listenings. It matters. it's probably the only thing that really matters. All the other script stuff you build on top of that. It's who you are in terms of not just, there's a saying, of course, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, but it's also who you are saying it. I think
That's
that
right.
would be a little tidbit that I would add to that one.
That's right, man. That's right. She's powerful. I like this topic a lot, but let's chat into this. If you could restart high ticket sales today, and I think maybe this might be the topic, but maybe it's not. Maybe you want to add on to it and share some other intel. But if you started from scratch today, like what do you feel like you would do differently? Like, is it what we're talking about? Just focused on building your self-image, self-identity? Is there anything else, any other layers maybe you'd want to add into that while we're on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to take apart, the experience you've had becoming who you are today and say how would I do it differently? Because there's a number of things that maybe if they weren't perfect, I still would want to do that, right? Because it's how I
Hmm.
got here. What I would change is I'd be less hard on myself.
Mm.
Just straight up, I'd be less focused on being perfect because I'm Mr. Perfection over here,
Oh, right.
recovering
Yeah.
perfectionist, right? If a call didn't go well, I was upset about it. If I messed something up and I knew it was me, I'd be depressed about it. If I closed something and it was amazing, I'd feel great. That was the problem. It was tying the emotions to the quality of the work rather than being happy about just doing the work, making the progress,
Mm.
and making the money, or not, and then getting a lesson. So that would be the biggest thing that held me back. I would say the longest. I said it took me a few years to figure this out. It didn't need to take that long. That would be the biggest thing I would change. I would get into it and get after it a lot faster and a lot more intently than I did. Not to say that I wasn't committed. I was. I did the training. I paid for the stuff. I went to the events, but that's not what gets you the results. It's getting on the
Yeah,
phone, right? It's getting
that's right.
talking to people who can get you on the phone, then getting on the phone, and then being okay with doing that and not being perfect. I think that that was the biggest thing that I would change, and I would recommend everybody adapt because even in the setters that I manage right now on our sales team, that's a big factor. If I can get them out of their own heads and say, hey, make your first calls. I don't care if you book anybody, right? Like make some mistakes, figure it out, and then let's set some goals. And then let's get into it. And let's make sure you're on track. And then let's make sure what your actions are doing on a weekly basis is in alignment with your goals and the expectations and the outcomes you want to see. But the
That's
first
right.
thing is getting out of your own way. At least it was for me. And that's what I would say is to my younger self, if I would start all over, is get in it and get it a lot faster so that you can get the reps in quicker and get a lot farther.
Oh man, I'm the same way, dude. I'm just ex-perfectionist. I've had to let that go, and sometimes it still tries to creep back in every now and then. But yeah, I love that, dude. I think th that line you just said is something that I share with a lot of people. Like, are you telling yourself like you're actually doing these things, or are you truly in alignment with with the person you're trying to become and doing the activities necessary to get there, right? So if you're
Yeah.
listening to this right now and you're struggling, ask yourself that question. Are you just, again, just saying you're doing these things, or are you actually doing them and being in alignment with the person you're looking to become? Because it does take a lot, guys. It's not just as simple and easy. It takes work, right? It definitely takes work.
Indeed.
So that's good. Dude, what I want to hear about is this time that you went on vacation and
Dude,
came back fired. What the heck went down, and how did that maybe impact how you do sales or business or life?
yeah. Yeah, I you'd asked me this question earlier preparing for the podcast. And I was like, how open do I want to be in talking about this
Yeah.
subject? But I figured the more open, the better, right? What else are we gonna do here? Yeah. So at this point, I actually wasn't even functioning in a sales role. The same company that I had started with, I had moved into a more administrative position because that's my love and background is management and people and processes. That's what I love. That's why I got into sales. Actually, it was to be in business to help business owners do that very thing. And so I believe that, we are who we are based on a multitude of skill sets and we're
Mm,
compensated as such. So in any case, I was operating in this capacity. And one of the cardinal rules that I have for myself now is make sure you always have clear expectations
mm,
whenever you're doing anything, especially in terms of taking off work for vacation. Um, Nothing to say negatively about the company at this point, nothing to say about the people who were there. I love them all. But in this case, the biggest problem was a lack of clear expectations. Because what ended up happening was I'd been working in this capacity for a number of months. So I wasn't in the first 90 days or anything like that. And my supervisor had taken a week off a couple of months prior because she had kind of gone through the same thing. And so I was like, okay, seems like we can just do that. All right. And so I said that I was going to do that because I had a commitment that was offered to me. I was like, oh, I would like to do that. Week long kind of a commitment where I was just totally logged out, not going to be doing anything. And I think that's good for everybody to do every once in a while, as long as it's under the same expectations that everybody has. And so, long story short, it was fine prior. Nobody had anything negative to say. Just make sure that you got all your stuff taken care of, obviously, as we do. Came back the next couple of days, was notified that I was going to be let go because I had put too much pressure on the team in my absence. And my first response was, if I had known that, I would have worked on vacation, right? Or I would have done something else. And so, what I would say to all the people out there in terms of what I learned through that experience is, number one, make sure you have very clear expectations of what's expected of you, whether you're in a sales role, appointment setting, administrative, doesn't matter really. Sometimes in the online space, we forget why corporate has all the rules it does, is so that stuff like this doesn't happen, right? So that you aren't making a mistake unintentionally and everybody else understands and appreciates what you're bringing to the table, as well as what leeway you have too. The second rule I kind of established for myself after that was, don't assume people understand your value. And that's
a powerful one.
Yeah. And that's something I've had to learn too, especially with different people like Layla Hermosi and stuff like that, talking online, making sure you're documenting all the stuff that you are doing, making sure it's very clear what you contribute and what you produce on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Even if it's something as simple as sales and booked appointments and stuff like that. Yes, it's in a dashboard somewhere. Yes, somebody has the numbers tracking, but make sure that you, your team, your supervisors are aware of that. Not that you're bragging about your results or anything like that, but just make sure that you know, kind of, for you, first of all, but then for those around you, what it is that we do here, so that nothing goes like unassumed. Because when people assume, if people don't know what you're doing, they're going to assume you're doing nothing, right? That's just a thing that I've had to realize, just being in this field. And so, keeping clear expectations, I would say, would be the biggest thing that I learned from that, but also making sure you understand what it is you're bringing to the table, and don't like bring so much that it's stupid for people not to notice. That would be the thing. And I'm not saying that you just say what you do and don't change anything. Change what you do so you're bringing more, so that it's more apparent, and so that you have that ground to stand on, no matter where you are, what you're doing. That would be the way I would kind of phrase it.
Dude, I love that. And as much as like earlier I talked about all these people coming to the lake house, and I somewhat did set expectations up front. But as I'm hearing you say, and as I thought about it deeper myself, I'm like, well, in the concept of the extreme ownership, I had to take responsibility for that situation, because maybe I could have done a better job setting more clear expectations, to your point up front, right? Maybe I could have been more apparent, right, and communicated this stuff, and said all this, even done a better job, right, up front. And so at the end of the day, like, I take responsibility for what happened, which is why, like, for May, if we do allow anyone to come at the lake house, I'm like, this time I'm making them sign something.
There we go.
Right, that says, hey, if you pull up, you're doing X, Y, and Z, or you're never invited back again to the house.
Yeah.
And so it hit me after, though.
It's just the rules.
No hard feelings, just the rules, right? It's like, hey, I still want you back out. I'll give you another shot. It's all love, right? It's tough love. But this time I'm going to be a lot more clear, and I'm going to make them pay for the mates before and after, ahead of this time. So still going to be staying at an Airbnb or a hotel, right? Yeah. But if everyone goes in on the cost of pitching for the maid, I was like, hey, this will work. And if I'm clear about these expectations and what I'm expecting from them, and how to keep the house clean and how to clean the gym clean, and I have them sign something that says, dude, I'm committed to doing this, maybe the conversation changed, and maybe we don't have the same issues we had first time around. So appreciate you sharing that. And it brought back what I wanted to share, kind of full circle, about them coming back out again.
Yeah, exactly. And just to touch one more thing on that, I think the other thing that I've learned is people set expectations differently, right? It's not like the way one person sets expectations holds up to the same way another people.
That's right.
Does. And this is why I think the how you do anything is how you do everything thing is really important, is because we've all had superiors in our life, whether it was teachers, bosses, officers, what have you, who tell you to do something, and then whether or not you do it doesn't really matter, right? Like, we've all had that experience where a guideline or a statement was made, and then whether or not gets carried through is like, oh, is it a big deal? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And then we've also had other people who, when they say something, you better follow it, otherwise, hell's coming, kind of a thing. And then you take it a lot more seriously. And so I
That's
think that the
right.
thing that I've learned is to make sure that, first of all, I'm communicating that, hey, when I say that we're going to do something, it matters. It's not just like a suggestion. It's a command, or it's a guideline. It's a rubric, so to speak. Because we do have a lot of people and stuff in our culture now that treats things too casually, in my opinion, and just lowers that bar of, oh, it's not that serious. Oh, it's important, but only if you really want to, right? And I think that
Hmm.
that is in opposition with the "how you do anything is how you do everything" mantra, so to speak. Because if it didn't matter, why would we care, right? If it didn't matter, why would you say, hey, clean up your weights? It does matter. So if it matters, it better matter enough for your actions to follow it. I guess going back to the first point we talked about,
Yeah.
it has to drive change, and not every leadership authority follows through with that. And so I think that that's part of the effective communication too, is making sure the understanding is, like you said, if X doesn't happen, then X will happen, rather than just being like, hey, put away your weights. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but
That's
those
right.
clear expectations, I think, really goes a long way. And that's, we're using the gym example right now, but that goes with everything. It was just KPIs for sales, that, activity, volume, OKRs, like all that kind of stuff. It always has to come down to a if this or that kind of a situation for full clarity.
Ah, I love that, dude. And it's been one of the bigger lessons I've learned recently. Just a few weeks ago, I went down to a workshop for a guy named Mike Weinberg, who's written a couple pretty big best-selling books in the leadership space, like Sales Management Simplified and New Sales Management Simplified. And I realized, and yeah, I hear the typing. I'm like, this is going to be good for you. In fact, we can get offline after this, and I'll share
Yeah,
with
I
you
just
like just.
took it down real quick to make sure I didn't forget.
Oh, dude, it's been a game changer because everything we're talking about, it gives you the applicable solution on how to implement it. And so basically the gist of it all is you need results-based meetings set. Aside from all of the coaching that we do, aside from all of the mentoring that we do, right? We need once or twice a month to have a 15-minute specifically results accountability meeting, right? We don't necessarily want to call it the accountability meeting. It's like called the results meeting, but it is to provide accountability and remind them why the heck we're here and why the heck we do what we do. And if you don't do it, these are the outcomes that could happen, right? And so we can get offline about that. Or I know you're coming down in about a month or so in person. We can definitely share more about that, dude. But I think that's been the biggest game changer for me, is because the moment I started implementing that, the moment we already saw like things getting impacted and change, like right off
Yeah.
the bat. It's
Yeah.
amazing what happens when people know if they don't start performing that, their time here is short. It's amazing the things that'll start happening when you add that layer of accountability. And I'm
It is.
guilty, right, of like not being the best. Like, yeah, it's tough love, but like, I could sometimes be too nice or too easygoing with people and
Well, it's
to
funny you
this and to
mentioned that.
that.
Yeah, I just been given that feedback earlier this year, actually, and we're not very far into 2025, where I was, in terms of my responsibilities on the team, accountability one was something we were realizing was a little bit lacking. Not that it was doing anything wrong necessarily, but like when somebody has a KPI that's in their contract that they've signed and they're not following up with it, it's my responsibility to be like, hey, what's going on here, right? Like, not even necessarily in a positive or negative way. And I think this is really important in terms of how I view accountability, is it's just transparency. Like, that's all
That's
it is.
right.
Like, you take from it what you want. Like, if we say we're going to achieve these things and we're not achieving them, what do you think of that? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It better not be a good thing, right? But
That's right.
you know what I mean? Like, I'm not coming here as like slapping you across the back of the head saying you should do better. It's saying, hey,
That's right.
there's a gap here. What are we going to do about it? And if the solution is not, I'm going to do X more things to make sure I get there, then we got some talking to do. We got
That's
some
right.
things to work on, because either we're both wasting our time, or we need to have some sort of shift. And it's been a huge change. I was kind of afraid that when I started applying a bit more pressure, let's just say, because it's not being negative, it's applying more pressure on the accountability side, 100% positive responses. 100%. I'm not guaranteeing that for everybody out there. I'm sure you'll get some people who are a little bit unhappy about being held accountable. But every single experience for me since that time a couple of weeks ago has been, okay, I'll take care of it. And either they do or they don't and they move on, right? And so that's really all it is. But I think accountability really creates clarity, is what it is. And I used to have a podcast called, Clearly Crucial. And so I'm a big fan of clarity because it just brings, not just in sales, but in these kind of circumstances, the lens to make decisions and to change things and take different actions if need be.
Man, there's so much you said there that I could unpack, but I'm gonna keep it simple. But it's funny you said how people appreciated the accountability. That's the biggest takeaway that I had. I dropped that on a meeting with 200 people, and I would probably say about 195 of them, I've never seen them more fired up to have accountability introduced in their life, like more
Right.
accountability, right?
Yeah.
And this is what I took away also from the workshop that I attended is, dude, A players love to be challenged and they love to be held accountable. Like they like competition, right? They like when someone holds their feet to the fire. And so it was an amazing takeaway because in my head, like I thought like all this negative stuff's gonna happen. I've never seen a group be more fired up to know like if you don't start performing, you're gonna be let go. Everyone all of
Yeah.
a sudden was just as fired up, and I could see, and I'm like, damn, dude, that is so freaking crazy. Like
Yeah.
it's people love to be challenged,
Well,
they love to be held accountable.
yeah, well, A players love to know what game they're playing, and you can't know what game you're playing unless the rules are clearly established and the borders are
Yeah.
defined. And people thrive with. I mean, this is because I have two young kids right now, and I'm learning all this. But people and children thrive with structure and a frame of reference they know they can play in, and they know that rather than maybe they're doing great, maybe they're not, and maybe it's fine, maybe it's not. Here's where we play, here's where you run fast or run slow, and that's what you're going to get. What are you going to do? It allows them, I think, to bring out what makes them A players, which is a desire to be excellent.
Man, dude, I could keep on going, but I want to
You got to
save
keep it
this
short.
next half of the conversation for when you're in person because there's a lot I didn't cover, and I could probably go on another hour. But I would rather save it and do it in person so we can put this friggin' nice little soundboard to use, and hopefully I get this virtual stuff figured out ASAP. But dude, I appreciate it, man. I certainly enjoyed this episode. It's been a while since I've actually had a conversation. It's been a few weeks, so it's nice to finally get back in doing this.
Well, it's nice to
I
be here. Thank
appreciate.
you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Is there anything that you didn't cover on this particular episode that you feel like maybe you want to leave with our listener today?
Ooh, yes, and maybe this can be just a little tidbit for next time. But we
Okay.
talked a lot about the role of a sales professional, right? The growth from outbound to inbound, all the different things we go through. One thing I'll leave for everybody too on the other end that we can get more into next time is I think that the path that I've taken that I think is a great path for a lot of salespeople, which is getting the training, obviously know what you're doing, getting into the experience. It doesn't matter if you're closing inbound calls or setting calls or closing them that you people you called yourself, but getting in the training so that you can be the person who can convert on a dime is really powerful. But that middle part where you're building your own skills is also really valuable for the people you're calling. Because think
Mm,
about this, like, and this is where I get a bit fired up, and probably why I'm in the position I am now. But when prospects reach out for help, like somebody's going to change their life. It's either going to be you or the next company or whatever. But when you have to reach out to somebody who's just going through their day and their week and you interrupt them and you say, hey, how are you doing? Like actually, and they have a conversation, you have a conversation where it's clear that something's missing and you have the
hmm
opportunity to change that. You just changed that person's life, right? Well, I'm thinking in the context of health, right? Because we work with V-Shred, we're all about fitness and metabolism and health, but it's true, right? Regardless of anything, whether it's a real estate deal or health or what have you, you're changing that person's life, but in the most direct way, where if you didn't pick up the phone, if you didn't call them, nothing would have changed.
That's
And
right.
that just, I think, is just an incredibly powerful thing for us to be able to do for people as well as for ourselves.
Dude, we'll end it there, man. That's powerful, and I agree, man. It's crazy how you can take nothing and turn it into something, you know? And so
Yep.
I've seen that happen and just lives being changed in the opportunities that I've had. So it's been awesome, dude. I look forward to continuing this conversation. We'll take off. We'll start back where we left off here, dude. And I'll see you down in May. But appreciate you doing this, Jesse.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the next episode, brother.